Hi guys, Mr. Sonnenberg here. Today we're going to be talking about gene expressions and mutagens. This is Science 24 students. We're studying Unit 3, and this is Topic 3 again. So what we have down here is a quick video link on mutations. It's about a 7-minute video that you can watch that does a really good job of explaining mutations and how they occur and why they occur. So what we'll do is we'll link this particular screencast to you, or I guess we'll share it with you, sorry. And what you can do is you can take a look at that link. We'll just share it on your Wolf Apps account. So let's dive into it. So what happens is we get genetic changes. And so these genetic changes actually occur in our genes, in our DNA. So if we take a look at here, these genetic changes are going to occur up top here. So most of the time, the process of cellular reproduction, it works very efficiently in us copying genes and such. But sometimes mistakes happen. But usually what the body does is it recognizes the problem and it finds the error and then it fixes it. But some cases, our repair mechanism, it doesn't work the way we want it to, and sometimes it fails. And that result of that failure can actually be passed on from generation to generation. So it could be from your parents to you, or it could be from grandparents to parents, parents to you, so on. Okay, so what we call these changes in genetic information that cause abnormal genes, we call those mutations. And just take a look down here, you'll see that word mutation. So this whole area right here is going to be important to know. We're talking about mutations, changes in genetic mutation in abnormal genes. So these genetic changes, though, okay, they can be caused by environmental factors and such. So if we have exposure to those particular environmental factors, not just genetically and things that occur within us and abnormal genes, but sometimes these things can be caused by things in the environment. So, and they'll cause those mutations. So environmental factors that cause mutations, we will call those mutagens. And I've got that underlined here, or we have that underlined. Okay, mutagens. So that are the environmental factors that cause mutations. And you'll want to know that as well. Now, some examples of these mutagens could be things like radiation or ultraviolet light, things that, forms of chemical exposure such as pesticides, and other things that are found in cigarettes and alcohol and other drugs. Those can cause mutations, and those would be called mutagens. Okay, so those are some examples of these mutagens. So most of these environmental mutations, though, are not passed on from generation to generation. However, there are some cases where the mother can pass them on to their babies and such. So I just have a chart here that talks about mutagens and effects on human embryos. I'm not going to go through the whole thing specifically, but I'm going to talk about a few things. So a few mutagens, though these are environmental factors causing mutations or abnormal genes, are going to be things like exposure to alcohol, exposure to prescription or illegal drugs, or then PCBs. Okay, so really what alcohol, if you're a mother during the developmental stages or during pregnancy, is consuming alcohol, then we're going to get a condition called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD. And now what happens is that's going to actually affect the child on the developmental time when the mother actually consumes the alcohol. So the rest of the time it's going to be fine, but at that point then we're going to see some of these defects. So what's the effect of that? Well, we're going to have low birth weight, facial or joint abnormalities, small heads. You're going to see facial features, especially in the nose and the eyes for FASD. Okay, and they're going to have difficulties learning behavior and mental health. So sometimes they don't understand social situations and such, or are somewhat impulsive individuals that are affected with this. But again, a mutagen has caused that form of mutation, and that's from environmental factors. So that was consuming alcohol during pregnancy. The other type would be prescription drugs and illegal drugs. So basically, if a pregnant woman during their pregnancy and sometimes takes prescription drugs, you would want to do that only under the doctor's care. But if you're taking restriction drugs, then what you can do is you can actually harm the fetus. So you might get premature births, low birth weight, drug addiction at birth. So children that are born with a drug addiction in the womb at the time. Mental limitations, unable to learn and such, and possible birth defects. So taking these prescription drugs, you actually saw back in the day when they used to test drugs with their LD50 testing, they would test them on mice, and then they said, okay, well, if a mouse can handle X amount of this drug, then what we can do is we can prescribe even more to humans based on their size. And we learned that it just depends on how these drugs react to the fetus. And so what we had were a lot of children born with birth defects that were taking these drugs and these medications, prescription drugs, and then they learned, well, we better take that off and make sure we don't use it for pregnancy and such, because it's actually causing more birth defects and such than we anticipated. And then PCBs are a mixture of toxic chemicals present in the environment because of improper disposal of wastes. So some are linked to various forms of cancer, including liver and kidney cancers. But you would have low birth weight as an effect of this mutagen being exposed to this mutagen. Mild symptoms often disappear with age, but anemia, liver conditions, skin rashes, anemia, dealing with iron, difficult coordinating movement problems, and I'll let you look at the rest of it as well. So what we actually have here is we have an autosomal recessive inheritance. So what we're going to show you here is basically having a form of a mutation. Okay, so we know that genetic information is passed on from 50% passed on from the mother, 50 from the father. And so what we have is we have in those trillions of cells within our body, each one of those cells having a nucleus. Within that nucleus having our DNA, and DNA being arranged in chromosomes. And then an arrangement of that DNA within the chromosome is actually going to give us our genes, and that's what we're going to pass on. So we take our dad's sperm and our mother's egg, and that is going to be what passes on this genetic information. So if we take a look at the picture on the left, though, what we're going to see is there are mutations that the parents both carry. Now, because they both carry it, there's a chance that there's an offspring that could be affected. But what's going to happen is it's based on the combination that occur in vitro. So that's when you're growing inside the mother's womb, and those things may affect you during those developmental stages. So an easy example of this is if the parents carry a mutated gene, which would cause you to possibly develop cancer. So we take a look at this picture over here. What we're going to actually see is we're going to see that we have our mother right here, our female, okay, and we have our male over here, so the mom and the dad. Now, they have this gene, and I'll just circle it. Each one has this gene for this autosomal recessive inheritance of some sort, but they have this gene for, say, cancer, for example. So now, if you have this gene for cancer, okay, or this gene that would help or cause you to develop cancer, then what happens is as they reproduce and they produce offspring, then we would see that based on this pairing, we're going to have some, well, this one's normal, but because this one has the gene here, this child, well, it's going to be a carrier, we would call it, okay? And then this one that's colored in, this is like a pedigree as well, right? In a sense. And now this is affected because if you look here, it has both of the genes. I'll circle both of those. Now, because both of those genes are present, then that individual would be affected by this disorder because those chromosomal pairings. And now we have because chromosomes from the male and the female gamete, they actually pair. And when they pair, if they both have that trait, then what's going to happen, that recessive trait, then we're going to see that individual be affected. And then we're going to see that form of mutation occur, okay, or gene expression. Now, inherited genetic disorders, though, usually mutations result in genetic disorders, which is a change to original sequencing of the genes. So basically, we're going to see an abnormality in the gene sequencing. So usually we see cytosine and guanine are going to pair up, the C and the G, and then adenine and thymine are going to pair up the A and the T. But sometimes we see some situations where these don't exactly pair up the way we wanted them to. So an example of this would be sickle cell anemia. Okay, so what that results from is an abnormal form of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is a substance in our red blood cells that actually carry oxygen throughout the body. And we actually learned a little bit about hemoglobin and blood in topic 2. So that's going to carry the oxygen. And so the oxygen, the red blood cells' job is they're biconcave. So as they float through the bloodstream, they're actually going to collect oxygen. oxygenated cell or blood is then transported to our tissues and such, and that's what helps us to move and repair. But then in the use of oxygen, once it's used up, then it actually circulates back up through the circulatory system as deoxygenated blood, and it gains oxygen through our lungs again. But when someone inherits an abnormal form of hemoglobin or the sickle cell anemia, they have poor resistance to infection. And so they'll also have low levels of iron in their blood. So what's going to happen when you have these symptoms or when you have these occurrences within your body is you're going to feel tired, you're going to get sick easily as you don't have the immunity, and that's because there's a lack of oxygen in your body repairing your systems and stuff. So that's an example of an inherited genetic disorder. And then lastly, we'll talk about, if you just take a look at the pictures over here, you take a look at this picture right here, okay? This is what right here, what a normal red blood cell would look like. So it's biconcave, and it has large surface area, very large cells, and actually they take up, besides the plasma, the other 49% of the blood is actually comprised of red blood cells. And so large surface area and that biconcave shape is actually going to help them collect oxygen. And so by collecting oxygen, that's good for our body. It's the reason you wouldn't feel, if you don't sleep well, you don't have a lot of oxygen in your body, it's difficult for you to function, and you feel sluggish and tired. Well, that's because you didn't sleep, you didn't get enough oxygen, right? But what happens is, if you look through the various steps, well, you can see the formation of sickle cell, a sickle cell red blood cell. So you can see here, and then it continues to grow until the last formation of it, where the sickle red blood cell looks like such. Looks much different than what we had right here in our biconcave blood cell. But now look at this over here in the sickle cell. So we have the deformation through sickle cell anemia, and that's how we're going to produce it. Now, if we look at the point of mutation, though, take a look at what a normal cell or a normal gene would look like, or a strand of DNA. Look right here at this pairing, or these pairings right here. Okay, notice that adenine and thymine are paired, and then guanine and cytosine are paired, and that's how it should occur, right? But what happens here is, look, we have this mutation that's occurred on our genes, and we have thymine now, which is supposed to pair with adenine, these nucleotides or these nitrogen bases that are actually present as the rungs of the DNA. But now we have, if we take a look right here, we have cytosine pairing with thymine, and well, that doesn't pair, that doesn't match, and now what we have is a mutation. Okay, and we're going to have an abnormal gene based because of that mutation. Okay, and you can see that right here, mutation. But then the last thing we need to look at is basically, like, we look at these pictures, well, we're talking about DNA sequence, and we're talking about how the red blood cell would look if it had sickle cell anemia, or if we had sickle cell anemia, and how it's going to be difficult to pick up oxygen because of its shape and such. But now we look at sickle cell anemia. How can we pass on from parents? Well, if I have an unaffected carrier father and I have an unaffected carrier mother, but they're unaffected, but they are carriers, so therefore they're going to have that trait in the form of a recessive trait. Well, just like the picture we looked at earlier, well, this one's completely unaffected. This one here is a carrier. I'll just put C for carrier. Oops. And this one's a carrier as well, so it could potentially pass on that sickle cell anemia trait. And then this one's just clearly affected because it has, if you look at this pairing right here, well, it has two recessive traits, thus meaning it's going to be affected because those genes have paired up. Okay, so basically what we have here, guys, is gene expression and mutations, and mutagens. Okay, mutagens being those environmental factors that can cause mutations, and mutations being abnormalities in our genes. And so we talked a little bit about some of these inherited genetic disorders, how these things can be passed on, and what mutagens are, and some examples of them: maybe drinking during pregnancy, using exposure to chemicals, maybe using prescription drugs and stuff, and what the effects can be at the developmental stage during that pregnancy. So these are, like I said, gene expressions, mutations, or mutagens. Hopefully this has helped. Remember, you can play, pause, rewind, go through your post-assessments, and you can actually answer the questions utilizing the screencast. Okay, good luck. Hopefully this has helped, and we'll see you on the next screencast. Thanks. Bye.